Zettel für die lange Weg. 2 Flaschen Whisky für die Zeit. Und ich date gern habe, du bist dabei. Maria geht, fahrt mal weg, ist weit. Wann ich geh, ich werd dir fehlen, wann ich geh. Du sehst nicht, was ich mach, du sehst nicht, wie ich lach. Ich werd dir fehlen, du watsch sehen. Hab krieg mein Zettel für den langen Weg. Du schönste, als mir finden kann. Es hat Maria und Dale ganz wunderbar. Als ich dir den weißen Dank. Wann ich geh, ich werd dir fehlen, wann ich geh. Du sehst nicht, was ich mach, du sehst nicht, wie ich lach. Ich werd dir fehlen, du watch sehen. Well, Kuda Ovid, leave a light. We are back at another month's show. Can you believe it is already February? And I want to start off by saying, Hallicher Aschermittwoch, happy Ash Wednesday. Do you wish somebody a happy Ash Wednesday? Probably not, but for those of you that are of the Christian faith, of course, today is a pretty important day, Ash Wednesday. Maybe you went out and got your ashes. I would hope that whether you're Christian or not, and you're celebrating Ash Wednesday or not, that all of you had some Fastnachts over the last couple days, because yesterday was Fastnacht in Pennsylvania Dutch culture. Of course, that means give me your potato donuts. And I know some people don't call them donuts. I know that, but I made mine fresh on Saturday because I wasn't able. Yesterday I had to work. So we had our fresh Fastnachts here at the Maidenford household, and they were, as we say in Pennsylvania Dutch, appetitlich. They were delicious. If you are joining us for the first time this month, welcome. It's glad to have you here. We do this every month. We go live with another edition of PA Dutch Live. And at this time, if you are someone that joins us frequently, you know what to do. Whether you're joining us on the YouTube channel or over on Facebook, please put in the comment section. Tell me who you are and where you're joining us from. I always love to give some shout outs. And there's people already that got stuff flowing in here. So let me give some shout outs tonight too. We'll start off with Lutrabi, Guda Obit aus Laudra in DePauls. We got Germany already represented, staying up after midnight. Guno at Lutrabi. I don't know how you say your name, but we'll go with that. Our good friend Seth Moke, who joins us every month. Guda Obit and Guda Numidog Fundo in San Diego, California. Hari, I bet it's a lot warmer there than it is here. We had some ice. We had an ice storm here, Seth, where I live today. I bet you didn't have that. Our good friend Mo is joining us from Midlothian. That's in the Commonwealth of Virginia, down there below the Mason-Dixon line. Our good friend Norman Jung, he joins us every month, also staying up past midnight. Gute Maria Steinbach am Glan, Germany. Gute Obit, Pennsylvania. How about that? Good to have you, Norman. Is your lovely daughter also there joining us as well? I hope so. Or is she in bed? She's got school tomorrow. She's probably in bed. Our good friend also joins us every month, Dolly Moyer from Fleetwood. Beautiful. You're right. Beautiful. Berks County is correct. We have Ethan joining us. Guda Oeras, Canada. I believe that's the Ethan Road, Gel. He's a young man. We're going to have to get him on the show here at some point in the future. He has quite an interesting story to share. We'll get him on here at some point. But welcome and greetings from Canada. Nancy is joining us from South Carolina. Sounds good. I bet the palm trees are swaying. Are the flowers blooming down there yet? If not, probably soon, huh? Rachel, she joins us every week too with Spencer. Jacob and I are here once again. Jacob, the banjo picker. He's there joining us with his wonderful mom, Rachel. So glad to have you both joining us. Seth says, no ice, but plenty of wind and rain out there in California. Well, I guess that's better than ice, right? And we got Donna joining us from Holtwood, southern Lancaster County. A beautiful part of Lancaster down there in the southern part. And great. Thanks for joining us, Donna. If I didn't give you a shout out yet, of course, put your comment in the section, as it's coming up, and I'll give you guys a shout out. Oh, real quick, David joins us. He joins us almost every month, waving his hand down there in Boyerstedt, down there in Berks County as well. Well, as we do every month, give me a second here. We got some stuff to update everybody on before we bring our guest on. And if you didn't see the preview or the promo, we do have Dan Roe. He's in the green room just waiting to get on the show to tell us all about the Gruber Wagon Works. We'll talk about that in a minute here. And of course, tonight we'll have something in Pennsylvania Dutch and a song as always. But some things for your calendar coming up here as we exit winter, getting heading into the spring, our good friends at the Berks History Center are once again doing another brunch and brushes. They've done this multiple times, and every time they choose a piece of art that is Pennsylvania Dutch themed. And there you can see the image that you would be painting this time. Looks like a distelvink, and that'll be on Saturday, March 4th at 10 a.m. You can check out their website for more information, also their Facebook page. It's a great event, and they usually have quite a lot of people in attendance. So if you're looking for something to do on the 4th, check them out. Also, mark your calendars if you're in the greater Berks, Lebanon, Lancaster area, Schuylkill area. Every year there is the Pennsylvania German Sommerloft. Sommerloft's a Pennsylvania Dutch word for like coming together. So they do this every year in March. This year's event is Saturday, March 18th. It will be held at the Midway Diner. They have a banquet room, and that's where it'll be taking place in the back. And there's a lot of cool things there. I know that the print's a little small, but it's a whole day's worth of events. It's free to get in. The Shwadora Swala, which they'll be singing at 10:15, just real quick. There's children's activities. And then I would recommend, if you're going, definitely stay till 2 o'clock, because at 2 o'clock, yours truly and my good buddy Chris LaRose, we're going to be doing an hour of Ask a Pennsylvania Dutchman, Pennsylvania Dutch comedy, music. Oh, we'll just have a good time. But you can check out more information on their Facebook page. Just look up PA German Sommerlof. It's a really nice event. Also, we talked about this before, but it was so popular and they had so many people interested that they're doing it again. The Kutztown Folk Festival, in conjunction with the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center in Kutztown, is going to have a replay, essentially, of their presentation on Mountain Mary. The two speakers that will be there will be our good friend Dr. Josh Brown from the University of Wisconsin, who will be talking about the art of folkcraft, and the director at the center there, Patrick Dunmoyer, who will be talking about Mountain Mary, the sainted healer of the Ole Valley. That is on March 19th, 2 to 4. You do need tickets. Check out their website. You can get the tickets through the Folk Festival. And I think all money raised also benefits the festival and the Cultural Heritage Center. So that's something else to check out. Sticking more with the Berks History Center, on March 25th, you can learn how to do the traditional art of Pennsylvania Dutch or Pennsylvania German egg scratching, where you take an egg and scratch an image into it. This is often a tradition that the Pennsylvania Dutch practice around Easter time, and of course that is coming up here in April. So you can look out, if that's something you'd be interested in, check out the Berks History Center's website for more information. And one more thing for your calendar, dear friends. Easter on the Farm this year will be April 1st, and that will be at the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center there in Kutztown on the fairgrounds there. It is a free event open to the public. There will be live entertainment. There will be speakers talking about culture and history of the Pennsylvania Dutch, especially Easter-tide traditions. There'll be folk artists there selling their wares. It's a great opportunity to get out of the house. It's a Saturday from 11 to 4 p.m. You can mark that on your calendar. Again, it's free. Everything's free. It's great. It's great. If you remember last month, I shared with you our good friends in Germany have decided to take some traditionally palletized cartoons and put them and set them into Pennsylvania Dutch. I shared one with you guys last month. Here is this month's. And for those of you who speak Pennsylvania Dutch, I'll give you a chance to read it real quick and see if you get it, from our good friend Stefan Boisel, who's the artist. If not, the wife says to the husband, "Schlaf gut," which means, sleep well, sleep tight. And he says, "Hör auf, mal alles zu sauer, was ich du soll." Stop. Why must you always tell me what to do? Good joke. Husband and wife jokes go really well in the Pennsylvania Dutch humor. Maybe it's funnier in Dutch than it is in English. I don't know, but I thought it was pretty good. So we want to thank our good people at Agrio DE. That is a website and store over in the Palatinate, a region where most of our ancestors come from, for another one of their cartoons. So thank you, Stefan. That's the name of the cartoonist. Every month we give a shout out, a salute to a community in Pennsylvania Dutch country. And this month, the winner is, drum roll please, the big town of Mount Etna, or as its original name was, it was originally called in Pennsylvania Dutch, Wolbachstettel. So Wolbachstettel, named after the family that founded the town out there in extreme western Berks County, in that corner there. We want to give a big shout out, a salute to Wolbachstettel, Mount Etna, Berks County, Pennsylvania, founded in 1810, and a whopping population right now of, last that I could find, 489 people. But it's growing. Everybody wants to move to Wolbachstettel. Hey, real quick, a couple more people we want to give shout outs to. We have John McDevitt joining us from Gouda Obit from Walnut Port. Hello, nice to see you. We also have another German staying up late, Smario. Studio, Stuttgart here. Hey there down in southern Baden-Württemberg. Thanks for joining us. And finally, Kathy Kroll is joining us from Elizabethtown, Lancaster County. Well, Lancaster County is represented pretty well here tonight. That's good. All right, without further ado, our guest tonight, I'm really excited that he agreed to come on the show, is Dan Roe, Historic Resource Supervisor for the County of Berks. And I reached out to him to ask him if he wanted to talk to us and tell us a little bit about the story of the Gruber Wagon Works. So I'm going to remove this from my stream and bring Dan in. Dan, welcome to PA Dutch Live.
Thanks for having me.
We're so glad that you're with us. Before we get into your actual presentation, would you like to share with the audience a little bit about, do you have any Pennsylvania Dutch connection in your family?
I do not. I would say I married into some Pennsylvania Dutch, but my personal ancestry is a bit more French Canadian, actually. So
Okay.
little bit different. But my wife's side, she has a bit more of that Dutch side. So I have been indoctrinated, if you will, into some of the traditions and customs. And of course, my field of work, we get to study some of that as well.
Sure. All right. Well, Dan said that we talked, him and I ran a dress rehearsal earlier this week, and he said, I have tons of photos that I'd love to share. So I'm going to let you pull that into the stream, Dan, if you'd like, and then we can start this history tour of the Gruber Wagon Works.
All right.
As long as the technology allows us, right?
Always the pivotal question here.
While Dan's getting that ready, and if you're out there watching, of course, let us know. Have you ever been to the Gruber Wagon Works? Maybe as a kid, you remember seeing that growing up there in Berks County. I know I did over there in Grings Mills. What do we got, Dan? Is it working or isn't it?
It's let me just share. If I just share the screen here,
Yep.
There we go.
Or maybe not.
I'm getting there. I think I got it.
All right. Let's see.
All right. Are you seeing the Gruber Wagon Works?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Mustn't be into the stream yet. While Dan's working on that, we have some other people to give some shout outs to. Big Mama Hex is joining us. That's Rachel out there in another Boyertown, well represented. And our good friend Carol is joining us from Burnville. Went on a field trip there when it was still over by Mount Pleasant. Carol, you must be older than me, as I know you are. And we also have Barb joining us from Pottsville, Schuylkill County. You're our first Schuylkill County person joining us tonight. Barb, thanks for joining the stream. Dan's having some issues here. These things happen. So there at the bottom where it says the present plus and then the share screen, but it's not letting you do that, or
seems like.
Ron Diddy is also joining. He says, "Wie bist du?" from Wilkes-Barre. Hey, but originally from Elizabethville, aka Benderstedtel. I never heard the original name of Elizabethville. Thanks for sharing that, Ron. They're in Upper Dauphin County. How about that? Dan, do you think you could email me the PowerPoint maybe, and then I could bring it into the stream? Think that might help?
I could give it a shot. I fear the size is going to be a little bit
Okay.
too big.
Yeah, I wonder why it's not
Yeah, let's
sharing.
see. I'm right on the. And to bring this up.
Well, Dan, if we can't get it to work, we can't get it to work. You can at least talk to us, though, I'm
Sure.
sure, and tell the story a little bit. And maybe while you're talking, if you try clicking, I don't know, just
Comes
sit,
on.
look.
Yeah, so as Doug mentioned, I'm Dan Roe, I'm the Historic Resource Supervisor with the Berks County Parks and Recreation Department. And I operate the Berks County Heritage Center, which is one of 9 parks within the county system in total. And 2 of our main features there at the Heritage Center include the Gruber Wagon Works and the C. Howard Heister Canal Museum, which highlights the story of the Schuylkill Navigation Canal and the Union Canal, which ran through Berks County. And in addition to those 2 sites, we have a number of historical features that kind of dot the landscape there at the Heritage Center. The park itself was an active dairy farm going all the way back to the 1770s. The county took over the property in the late 1960s. And then at that point, started converting it into a park. And if you're familiar with the area, or if from out of the region, a main component of the entire park system is something called the Union Canal Walking and Bicycle Trail. So 4.5-mile trail that connects most of our park properties. Heritage Center sits about halfway on that trail. So certainly a lot to see if you ever get the chance to come on out and see the park. But tonight I'm here to share with you the story of the Gruber Wagon Works. And it's really a twofold story. One is related to the history of the wagon works itself, the Grubers and their factory operation and what they produced here. And the second is really the preservation of the structure and why it's still here today. So do we have the photos now?
I hope so. It looks like we're at least making the right progress here. I have something up here, but it's a gray screen right now. You should see that too, Dan, if you're looking at the StreamYard stream.
All right.
Ooh, it's loading. Okay.
Okay, so let me just put this into there. How about now?
That's still a gray screen. Maybe if you go back to that, the image that you were just on was actually working. Then you could see the images somewhat.
Okay, we can do it.
We'll just have to do the way we do, right?
All right, sounds good. So let me jump forward here. So I went over the Heritage Center. Several features here, as I said, on the landscape. But let's jump right into the wagon work. So the photo that you see here, this is really as you would find the wagon works today if you were visiting in the park. And I should mention, we are open to the public seasonally. We're open typically May through October. This year, our first day will be April 29th. And then we're open Thursdays through Sunday. So we offer guided tours of the wagon works during that time. You can find more information on the county website if you search for the Parks and Rec Department, as well as on our Facebook page. But here you see the Gruber Wagon Works. One thing I'll point out with this photograph, it's basically a restored structure back to its heyday of 1915. And as you take a look at it, it really doesn't follow any kind of architectural pattern or style. And the reason for that is the Grubers, as their business expanded, they simply added different parts of the building as needed. So they literally will just slam things in together. So today we're left with a very unique and very rare example of one of these 1800s factories. And primarily what was made here were two products. The Gruber specialized in making hay flat wagons that you can see here in this image. And as the name would tell you, typical farm utility vehicle used to store grain or hay. And most of these 12 to 16, 18 feet long. But a couple things to point out. You'll notice this green color scheme on the top, red and black and yellow pinstriping on the bottom. All of the Gruber wagons were painted that way. So very recognizable, a bit of branding, a bit of marketing for them. And to show you their second type of wagon, this is a typical box wagon that you would see here being produced at the wagon works. And you could think of this more or less as a pickup truck from the time period. So you could use it on the farm, you could take it in town. And again, just like with that hay flat, you will see the same color schemes. The Grubers would stencil their name on there. Again, a bit of marketing on their box wagons here. This wagon in particular dates to about 1916. And it's been restored about 3 times. And there's a lot of story to that, but to just summarize it, it gives you a great look at the paint colors when it would have come out of the shop. So what typically will happen to that green color over time often fades to a light blue. So a lot of folks will end up having a wagon that they think's Gruber, but it has this blue top to it, and they'll call us up and say, "Oh, I know it's Gruber, but it looks blue." Well, it very well could be. You just had some of that fading. So the Grubers family owned and operated the business pretty much from the very beginning. Their founder, Franklin H. Gruber, that you see here, he's a farmer initially outside of Burnville in a town known as Mount Pleasant. As he has a side wagon repair business, I should say. And over the years, that gets a little bit more successful for him. So eventually he will go into a full-fledged wagon factory operation. And over time, 4 of his 5 sons will go into the business with him, and they will each take on a very specific operation of the factory. So zip through the sons here, just so you have some perspective. This is John. He was a wheelwright, so he's working on the spokes and parts of the wheel, the hub, but he also becomes mainly the business administrator, if you will, for the factory. Adam Gruber, he was the painter here at the factory. And unfortunately, he dies fairly young in his early 30s from a wagon accident. But when you think about this industry, the painters were really the rock stars of the industry. Their individualized skill set for painting, doing some of that decorative scroll work. Again, it's a lot of marketing. It's a lot of branding for these factories, a way to differentiate themselves from their competitors. So a lot of what you see was somewhat fashioned by Adam himself. And after he passes away, one of his apprentices named Sam Kreider will take over the paint shop, and he maintains a lot of that similar style that Adam created for the factory. Jacob H. Gruber, he was also a woodworker and a wheelwright in the factory too. And George Gruber, let the slides catch up here. George Gruber was the blacksmith, and I'll have a photo of him a little bit later. When you think of a blacksmith, think of a very tall individual, very muscular, very big. George was no exception. So a lot of doing that I dare say, old-fashioned blacksmithing is what George was employed at the factory. Just as a side note, the only son to not go into the wagon making business was Franklin H. Gruber. He eventually will become a Lutheran minister. He'll live out most of his days in Chicago, and he serves as the president of the Chicago Lutheran Theological Seminary for a number of years. But if you look him up today, you would discover that he actually collected rare manuscripts and books and has eventually acquired, I should say, one of the largest holdings in the country owned by the seminary out there. So really kind of fascinating side story with Levi Franklin and the Grubers. So as I said, Franklin H., he gets invested into the wagon business himself. And so he will settle in Mount Pleasant. Around 1882, he will buy a property that was formerly the William Penn Hotel that you can see here in the photo, and he builds his shop right pretty much across the street from there. Now, this next slide, I'm going to show you several images here, and this really gives you an overview of the expansion of the factory over time. And so in 1882, this starts out as a basic two-story rectangular shop that you see here. And again, over time, there'll be some significant building additions. And this next photo will give you a sense of, that the early years of the factory. So this is taken around 1884. Again, two stories. Typical for most wagon production at this time. Your workshops were on the first level, painting on the second. Painting was the cleanest level for that. So oftentimes parts and materials are going to make their way up to that second floor. So by 1885, business is looking good, and the Grubers will again expand with the factory. You can see this blue section here that is added on. It was actually an old farm building the Grubers had at one of their properties, and they physically moved it to the shop and attached it to the building. And this will eventually become part of the machine shop. But, just the fact that they're doing that in 1885 is pretty impressive. And by starting to get into the early 1900s, late 1800s, business really picks up, and a concern for the Grubers is their power source. So early on, they're using a water turbine to do most of the powering. Their whole factory was set up with a system of line shafting and belt systems. And so over time, they'll expand from that water turbine to a small steam boiler that you can see here with the yellow parts of the structure. And eventually they will move on from that. But one of those additions at that time is something we call the iron shed that you have a good view at here. And if you think about a wagon, there's lots of metal parts, lots of blacksmithing, lots of iron working that's needed. And some of these shelves will stretch almost 20 feet all the way to the back of the shed here. They were getting raw materials shipped into them. Most of the factories they were purchasing from were based in the Midwest. Most of these are coming into Pennsylvania on rail, typically to Leesport, where the Grubers would pick it up and then take it overland to their shop. But just a general storage space there. So I mentioned the power sources a little bit here. And as I said, they started with a small water turbine. Eventually, they'll add a steam boiler engine to enhance that power. But by 1906, they're really coming into pretty heavy production time period. Both of those sources are just inefficient. So at that time, they will purchase a Otto gasoline engine, hit and miss engine. And you can see here in the photograph, let me just jump to the next one, give you a better view here. This engine has two very large flywheels on either side. And on the wheel on the left, there is a drum that extends out. A large belt will wrap around that drum, connect into the line shaft system. And that will be the power source for the entire factory from 1906 until they closed their doors in 1972. So they never modernized their power source or operation from 1906 on. Remarkably, this engine is still functional. It was not when the county first acquired the property. Retired mechanical engineer who was a volunteer here at the Wagon Works for a number of years, spent several years fixing this up, getting it into this condition. And we actually operate it typically twice a year, some of our larger events and festivals that we do hold here on the grounds of the park or the Wagon Works. So really 1900, early 1900s, there's a bit of transition here with the Wagon Works. Franklin H. will die in 1898. I mentioned the early passing of Adam, but around 1904, the remaining brothers will basically take full ownership and operation of the factory. And at that point, they really start looking to modernize their production. So basically what takes place is they move away from doing everything by hand and starting to utilize machinery and some of the innovations that are available to them at this time. So before we jump into the shop, a couple of basic diagrams just so everybody gets kind of the sense of what we're talking about when you're seeing some of these photographs. So here's a box wagon, again, fairly typical. And the wood material that's being used, best way to summarize it, softwood on the top, hardwood on the bottom. Early on, the Grubers were harvesting their own lumber, but again, pretty early on in their operation as well, 1890 or so, they start acquiring lumber to keep up with their parts and production. So I'll jump down here to a profile of a wheel. Main components here, you have a hub in the middle, spokes that go into the hub that connect to something called a felloe. So picture the rim of a wheel. Most wagon wheels will be constructed with two felloes. And then on the outside of those fellows, you will have an iron tire banded around that will complete the wheel structure for you. So we'll talk about all of those facets here in just a little bit. So the factory is really broken into you could say four major workspaces: a bench shop, basically the woodworking area, a machine shop where some of the more modern equipment was housed, a blacksmith shop, as well as a paint shop. And here's a photograph as a typical workbench inside the bench shop. So this is where the wheelwrights would be working. What you're seeing here in this image is just a simple vise with a spoke up in there, and it might be a little bit difficult to see, but down below, early on doing this by hand, it's just going to be done with a small spoke shave. So basically a miniature draw knife. You had wooden measuring gauges that would help give you the diameter and the width of these spokes. And then by hand, these would be whittled into shape. Another bench, you can see some hubs here located. That metal piece coming out of the top is a hub boring machine. So there's a large drill bit auger that's coming there into the middle. Hand power, you just crank that through and be able to drive that that center hole out of the hub to receive the axle. Here is a older photograph taken as part of the documentation of the building when the Army Corps of Engineers starts looking at this in the late 1970s for its relocation. But this is the hub pit. And I know it's difficult to see here in the photograph, but you have a hub with a spoke and there's a slot in the floor. Well, that slot actually extends down about 6 feet below the floor level. So what was happening here with a sledgehammer and a brace mallet and a sledgehammer, I should say, they were pounding those spokes in. So once you had one inserted, you would just spin that hub down to allow that inserted spoke to stick below floor level, exposing another opening, and you could pound the next one in. So the reason I show this is just a great example of some of the ingenuity that the Grubers had within the building. There's lots of little unique aspects to the structure that the Grubers fashioned pretty much on their own just to make their operation smoother and more efficient. And I mentioned the fellows. This gives you a good look here. Again, another wheelwright's bench. What's happening here, the fellows are being inserted or connected to the spokes. So there's one on the wheel, there's one sitting on the bench, and a spoke dog, just a real simple tool, basically with a metal hook. And by leverage, you would pop those spokes into pre-cut holes in the fellows. And while the Grubers would make most of the parts themselves during their busier time, they did actually get pre-made fellows shipped to them. The reason for that is to get that curve in the wood, you basically have to steam bend it, which requires a large kiln, just a bit out of the capacity of the Gruber. So they would get pre-made fellows shipped to them that they could then break apart, shape to size, depending on what they were being utilized for. So it's a real quick overview of the bench shop. And another pivotal year here with the factory is 1905. So back to this diagram of the building, if you take a look at that teal kind of greenish color, what happens in 1905, they expand their machine shop a little bit, but they also add a platform elevator right here on the old Burnville Road side of the structure. And that elevator will allow them to move parts and wagon bodies up to the second and third floor. So on the second floor, again, they're going to be doing that painting. Prior to the elevator, they were using a system of block and tackle to get those parts up to that area. So elevator is really, really efficient for them as far as increasing their productivity. And I'll talk a little bit more about its mechanics, but basically it works with a dumbwaiter. So it has an endless rope system that you use to pull it up, but then gravity is able to actually drop it down. And we still do use the elevator today. Now, currently we have modern steps on it that allows our visitors to get to the second floor a little bit more easily, but we'll put it down for larger groups that are coming out to the site. And it really only takes about two of us, less than 3 minutes or so to raise the elevator. It is a bit of a workout, I can attest to that as well, but still perfectly functional. So let's jump over into the machine shop. And the real change here, again, with kind of the wagon factory industry as a whole, around the turn of the century, is the introduction of some machinery that's going to make this production that much easier. And a real great example of that is what you see here. This is a spoke duplicating machine. So this was around as early as the 1880s, really becomes mainstream by the 1900s. And what it would do, instead of having to whittle one of those spokes by hand with a spoke shave or a draw knife, you could set up a pattern in the top chuck there of this machine, have a blank piece of wood down below, and when it was running, a follower would move a guide along your pattern and a blade cutter along the blank. And in just a few minutes, you would end up with a raw cut spoke similar to the size of your pattern. Now, you would have to clean it up a little bit, shave it down, shape it out a little bit more. But again, much, much more efficient than doing it by hand. Another example, we talked about the hub boring plate where you're driving it in by hand. This is a hub boring machine. And so this could actually drill a hole on both sides of the hub to open up that space for the axle. And right here in the front part of the photograph, this is one of those belts coming down from a line shaft, generating the power for this machine, again, going all the way back to that auto gasoline engine. But if you notice, the belts are crisscrossed here. All that's going to do is actually reverse the direction of your machine. So that was a clever way within any kind of line shafting shop that you had. You could alter the direction of the belts to get the machine to do something different if needed. And let me just show you this. This is kind of a full view here of the machine shop. And again, if you look up toward the top of that photograph, you can see a line shaft, number of belts and pulleys. Again, most of those will go to an individual machine, but that entire shaft is still being generated by that auto gas engine through a transfer of power. And so after Franklin's death, that's really when you saw the introduction of a lot more of this equipment taking place here at the Wagon Works. This photograph is taken 1905, so after the elevator. So again, you can see that elevator shaft extension kind of coming off of the building. And for the most part, the blacksmith shop is going to expand a little bit past this time period. But again, this is getting pretty close to what you would see today with the building itself.
Dan, can we jump a little bit maybe, because I don't want to, we don't, I mean, we try to keep the time going
Sure.
here, of course, but can we talk? So you've talked a lot about how the production and how they upgraded, and really it seems like they were moving with the age of the industrialization, and really being able to put out more and more wagons. But I think the most interesting story is what I'd love to jump to is what happens to make this plant move from Mount Pleasant to where it currently is. Can we jump to that part of the story?
Yes. So the Wagon Works again starts 1882. We give its last year basically officially as 1972, but with that said, the last wagon that's produced here is 1956, and even by the 1920s, the wagon production is obviously decreasing, and from the 30s, 40s, 50s on, it's really a repair shop. But even a better way to think about this structure, it becomes a bit of a community building. Frank P. Gruber, third generation now Gruber, who basically maintains the structure. He was known to give tours of this building to anybody who was interested. But what's really fascinating is that Frank P. Gruber was a pretty well-known antique dealer. And he, aside from just one or two items from the Wagon Works, maintained the originality of the structure. So, aside from this building, there's 19,000 original artifacts in it. And for me, I believe if those artifacts were not there when it was quote unquote rediscovered, I'm not sure that we would be having this conversation right now as far as this building being preserved. But here's a shot of it right at its closing in 1972. Um, and the reason it has to be relocated, for those of you not from, the Berks County area, is something called the Blue Marsh Lake Project. So the Blue Marsh Lake was built by the Army Corps of Engineers as early as the 1940s. There starts to be studies done as far as examining ways to mitigate floodwaters in Reading as well as Philadelphia. So, a way to be able to control high waters, mainly of the Schuylkill River. And what ultimately happens, this area, about 10 miles or so from Reading, near present day Burnville, Pennsylvania. This lake is constructed right above a tributary of the Schuylkill River, the Topahawken Creek, and it is mainly used as flood control. Now, over the years, this entire area is now used for recreation. So the Army Corps of Engineer operates the lake in that recreation area. But unfortunately, the town of Mount Pleasant was located pretty much in the middle of where the lake is today. So a lot of buildings, unfortunately, were lost with this construction. So as the Army Corps was inventorying some of the buildings in this flood area, they kind of stumble upon the Wagon Works. They realize it has all of this originality, and it starts a federal preservation movement. The timing of this was impeccable. It was right on the heels of the nation's bicentennial in 1976. And as it turns out, the federal government actually had some extra money for once because of the bicentennial. And so an act of Congress actually allocates funds for the government to preserve this and relocate it to a site. At first, where that site would be was not really clear. But again, timing is everything. The county was just in the early throes of developing some of their park system. And so eventually the county of Berks told the Army Corps, if you bring it to us and place it here at what will become the Heritage Center, we will then take on the operation. And so that's what happens. Now, the building is cut into 4 different sections, and literally moved about 8 miles up Route 183 to its current location in late December of 1976. And for us today, yes, this is a major project if we think about doing something like this in 2023, but even more so at that time period, it's one of the first what we would call design builds that the Army Corps undertook. And it's also one of the first times that the Army Corps was allowed to work with, I dare say, a third party contractor to help the government with this operation. So Again, it's cut into four different sections here. They were braced, and then they were moved right up 183. And let me just jump to
Those
this
are crazy
photograph
photos to see
here.
they take up the whole road.
Yeah, so this is my favorite shot. So for folks of the Berks County area, this is Route 183 going over what is today Route 222. I know if you've been local for a number of years, you might better remember this part of what is now Route 222 as the road to nowhere, which in fact it basically ended and so eventually was connected. But this is a great shot there. This is one of the larger sections of the building, and basically the machine shop and part of the blacksmith shop that's coming over to its spot. And essentially, it was all pieced back together. And today, if you go through the building, I could show you where some of those original cuts were when it was moved. But unless somebody points it out to you, you would not be able to tell, where those incisions took place here with the structure. So it's put onto a cinder block foundation in early 1977, and then it opens as essentially a public museum in 1982 as part of the Berks County Park System, and it has been operated that way ever since. It is listed on both the National Register of Historic Places and is also designated as a National Historic Landmark. So, as we like to say, just like the Statue of Liberty, but a little less famous.
Yeah.
So again, that's really kind of that moving in a nutshell. All of the artifacts, we get a lot of questions about that. They were cataloged. We've been in the process of cataloging, recataloging, and kind of having database control over what's there. But the Army Corps documented the structure. So as far as where things were, everything was placed back, with a great amount of detail. And today, within our collections, we have about 30 Gruber wagons that are on display here in the Wagon Works, as well as in a storage facility that we have here on the grounds at the Heritage Center. In addition to some of our canal materials as well. And we were fortunate. Now, the Grubers, they did not keep a lot of records, but they kept some. So we do have some business materials related to the Wagon Works as well, and a fair amount of their production records. So if you have, or if you know someone who thinks they have a Gruber wagon, you can actually give us a serial number if you can find it and read it. And on occasion, we can actually look up when that part of the wagon was built, what year it was constructed, and sometimes we get a customer name from that too. So just a lot more, information out there with the Wagon Works. So I know we're getting short on time, so I think I
Well, I
will
did
wrap
want
it
you
up
I wanted to
there.
give you the opportunity. You said that there are like at least 2 times a year where you have some pretty big events there at the Heritage Center. Could you just tell us what those what
Yeah, so
are the big
we do a
events if
number of
somebody was
different.
interested in going?
Yeah, so this year, one date I will put on the calendar right away, September 16th of this year. It's typically coincides with a National Museum Day where museums across the country offer free admission. But on that day, we're going do a belt running demonstration here at the Wagon Works. So the belts connect to today a small electric motor, which allows us to demonstrate the line shaft functionality and the machinery and how it would operate. And on that day, we will typically run the auto engine as a demonstration as well. So that's the big day for the Wagon Works. Specifically, we had a lot of success last year with kind of piloting that program. So I expect to have a bit of a festival feel, for the space on September 16th. When we kick off the season in April, on April 29th, we'll have a large family festival event in partnership with the Western Berks YMCA's. So again, the Wagon Works will be open. All of our facilities will be open. So that's another great opportunity to check it out. But
And
otherwise,
and
if you just pay us a visit during our hours of operation, you can go on tour of the building.
At any time. And all that information is on the website that if you can search, of course, I'll put a link in the show notes. So if you want to learn more or go visit, it is worth a visit. As Dolly says, a visit to the Berks County Heritage Center makes for a wonderful summer day trip. You can walk along the Union Canal by the Tulpahawken Creek. It is lovely. It sure is. It really, really is pretty area. Dan, I'd love to thank you for coming on. I mean, it's a rich story. And the Pennsylvania Dutch have always been known for their ingenuity. And of course, with farming, we all think of the Conestoga wagon. But there was also, the story of the Gruber wagon. I definitely wanted to share that. And I thank you so much. Your wealth of knowledge. I would recommend, guys checking out the Heritage Center in person. I'm sure Dan will be there and he can tell you a heck of a lot more. And you can actually put your hands on this stuff and physically see the history that we have here in our area. So, Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Sure, no problem. Thanks for having me.
And like I said, we'll put a link to the Heritage Center in the show notes so anyone can check it out and, follow along in their social media and things like that. Dan, take care, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Guys, how about that? I can speak. He said about you can search records. Well, I don't have a picture to share with you, but this is a true story. My family, we were farmers. The Maidenfords were, as were all sides of my family tree. We actually have a Gruber wagon in our family, and we restored it, and we were able to find the original serial number. We reached out to the Gruber Wagon Works. They checked the records. Luckily, the records were all there, showing exactly the date that my great grandfather had ordered a hay flat wagon, like he showed in the picture, and with that hay flat wagon, he got a miniature wagon, big enough to haul milk cans. And we have that fully restored in our family's collection. It's a really cool piece of history to have, and also part of Pennsylvania history and Pennsylvania Dutch history. There's a lot to learn there at the Heritage Center, excuse me. So check them out. Like I said, I'll put the show notes. It's put links to them in the show notes. So Dan, great job. We had internet issues, we had some tech issues, but we made it through. Every month I come to you with some Pennsylvania Dutch stuff. I am going to make this a little bit bigger. This month, of course, it is February. It's Valentine's. Maybe you sent somebody a Valentine or you got a Valentine, but I picked, this is funny. So Solly Hulsbuck is a pretty famous Pennsylvania Dutch author. He wrote a lot of prose stuff. And this is something I came across, and it is two Valentines. A guy writes to the girl he's interested named Polly, and then she responds to him. So on the left is the Pennsylvania Dutch. You can follow along if you read Pennsylvania Dutch, but if you can't, the English is right there on the right. So let me read this to you. So for the first one, this is the guy's Valentine to the girl, zu der Polly. Wann all Grick melassig wär und all Himmel Zucker. Wer kennt so süß wie du, my Paul, vom Grainog Nuff zu Schlucker? And she writes him back and says, Ihr Anwalt, wann alle Rabadinde wär und alle Feldpapier, kenn dich net schreibe, du all Kalb, was my Herz denkt von dir. It's great. I love it. So a little bit of Pennsylvania Dutch for you there. Hopefully your Valentine, if you got one, was a little bit nicer than that. Hey, it's time for music. We're going to turn to our good friend, Dave Kline, for our musical selection this month. I'm going to remove this from the live stream, and I need to, hopefully I'll have a little bit better. Here we go. So anyone that's from Berks County probably knows this song, Eckville Saturday Night, written by Greg Barr. This is a well-known song among the Pennsylvania Dutch. It's not in Pennsylvania Dutch, it's English. And here is Dave and his good friend on violin. Ken Garrett. I couldn't think. Kenny Garrett. And this is their rendition of Eckville Saturday Night. Enjoy. And then we'll come back and finish out the show.
Tempting way. We're gonna do this just for you. Will they get out the pretzels and they get out the beer and the house to the neighbor from the one store here? All night sweats until the morning light on an Eckville Saturday night. Now there's a fella up there called Old Norm. He's in his 70s, never been married, but he has a girlfriend. There's old Norm, go off to see his girl. She's ugly as the ground, have none of his squirrels. You holler, do them until the lights go out on an Eckville Saturday night. Well, get out the princess and get out the deer and holler to the neighbors. Come on, what's over here? All night sweats until the morning light on an Eckville Saturday night. since you come from Kempton, you know they do a lot of bird watching up there.
Yep.
You know, they have a guy up there by the name of Jimmy Birdwatcher.
Yep, going well.
Yeah, he used to hang around Hawk Mountain, you know.
Yep,
And he's in charge. That's him, Jimmy Birdwatcher.
always in charge.
This is his part of the song. There's old Jimmy looking at the sky. Little birdie gets him in the eye. He's sure glad the crowd can't fly next Saturday.
When you
Get out the pretzels and get out the beer. And you holler to the neighbor, come on, let's over here. All night sweats until the morning light on an Eckville Saturday Night. Get there. They got a couple fellas up there that aren't so ambitious. They might be what you call hillbillies up there. Oh yeah, up there near that creek that runs through there, and the pine swamp and such. Got a fella up there, he wanted to make hay, so he bought his daughter a scythe, because he didn't want to make it himself. But then it rained for 2 weeks. So one day he called to his daughter, he gave her hook boots and the scythe he bought her. He said, "You're gonna make hay, you're gonna hit the high water next Saturday." So you get out the princess and you get out the deer, and you holler to the neighbors, "Come on, what's over here?" All night sweats till the morning light on an Eckville Saturday night. Okay. Yeah. Come on. Now, you know there's a lot of wildlife up there where you live,
Yeah.
up there in Albany Township.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, something gets squished.
Yeah.
There's a guy up there by the name of Tommy Roadkill. Do you know him?
I know him, and he's doing very well now. He's a lot of good deer.
Oh, he drives all around looking for those deer, and he takes that fresh kill. Well, he hopes it's a fresh kill.
He doesn't care.
Takes it home and he sticks it in the pot and he cooks it up for dinner. Yep! There's Tommy Roadkill picking up his lunch. He'll run around the back and stick it in his trunk. He'll eat the eyeballs out of that skunk on an Eckville Saturday night. Well, you get out the princess and get out the deer, and you holler to the neighbors, "Come on, what's over here?" All night sweats till the morning light on an Eckville Saturday night. Well, you get out the princess and get out the deer, and you holler to the neighbors, "Come on, what's over here?" All night sweats till the morning light on an Eckville Saturday night. Thank you, boys and girls. And next up,
There you go, our good friend Dave Kline helping us out there with the famous tune Eckville Saturday Night. Everybody knows it. You held to your neighbor. Come on, once over here. If you're from Berks County, darn it, you know that song well. Well, people, we're getting here to the end of the show, but let me just share one or two more things with you. I want to go this view. As you know, every month we talk about our Pennsylvania Dutch merch shop that we got going on there. Rachel and I at zazzle.com/PA Dutch stuff. We got 2 new designs fresh out of the printer today, so to speak. There they are. These are great. I know them all. How about it? If you're Dutch or if you grew up Dutch, you know what that shirt means. I don't even know how to translate that in English. It just is a feeling, right? I know them all. So you can get that shirt, and you can also get it printed on other things. It doesn't have to be a shirt. And then on the right, this one, I really like this one we came up with. So we got a bunch of various farm animals, and we got the Pennsylvania Dutch word for them, including the farmer, the bower, right there on his tractor. So that's a cool one, and that's also available for kids in a kid size shirt and a onesie, I think, too, for your little puppy, your little baby. So check it out if you are interested. We have other stuff too, of course. Here we have two satisfied customers in our new Dunavera t-shirt. Actually, I think I ordered one too. Dunavera Mo, I know he's joining us on the live stream tonight, so he's showing off his new shirt. But we have tons of things there on the website, so please feel free to check it out. Go to zazzle.com/PA Dutch stuff. Again, it doesn't have to be a t-shirt. You can get magnets, you can get signs, you can get shirts, you can get sweatshirts, you can get all different things. I think even towels are available. So you can check that out, of course. If you like what we're doing here, hey, you want to buy me a coffee? You don't have to, though. All money raised through the Buy Me a Coffee. If you go to buymeacoffee.com/Doug Mainford, we'll go to the upkeep of the channel, help pay the bills, help keep the lights on, all that kind of stuff. And those of you that have already given donations, thank you so much. It's truly appreciated. If you would like to give money, there's the address. And if not, that's okay too. But we like to throw it out there in case anyone is interested. We are wrapping up another month. My goodness, February's almost round. We had Valentine's Day, we had Fastnacht, it's Ash Wednesday, and now we're moving into Lent for those of us that are practicing Christianity. But we got a lot of things coming up in the spring. And let me tell you right now, mark your calendar, because I know when our next PA Dutch Live is going to be, and that is March 15th, that Wednesday at 6 p.m., like always, live right here on the YouTube channel. And next month, we will be bringing on my good friend and a good friend of the channel, Josh Brown, born and raised here in Pennsylvania, but right now is teaching German out there in Wisconsin. But we're going to be bringing him on to talk about a recent presentation that he gave at the Schwenkfelder Museum on Pennsylvania Dutch Civil War letters. Another history topic. This one is fascinating. We often think of, the Civil War, and we all have this image, and we know that Pennsylvania Dutch soldiers fought. But, letters tell us a lot more of what those soldiers actually were thinking and experiencing. And you never, ever hear about any of this from the Pennsylvania Dutch perspective. Josh has done some research, has come across actual letters, and he's going to share that story with us next month. And also talk about, something I've always thought about. You get the average farm boy that gets drafted into the Civil War in the 1860s, growing up speaking Pennsylvania Dutch. Maybe his English was somewhat okay, but how good was his actual writing abilities? And there he is in the middle of, major war. It's a fascinating topic, fascinating conversation. Can't wait to have Josh on next month. So please mark your calendars for March 15th of next month. It'll be good. Check out all those things that we were talking about at the beginning of the show. There's a lot of stuff coming up here towards the end of winter and late spring. If you're heading off to a Grunsau Lodge meeting, I'll be performing at a bunch of them here coming up. Send me some pictures and I'll include them in next month's show of you in the groundhog or you just having fun in a Pennsylvania Dutch setting. I'd love to share those kinds of photos with everybody if you have some. Of course, keep in contact with all of us here at PA Dutch 101. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that social media stuff. And of course, here on the YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet to the YouTube channel, I don't know better. What are you waiting for? Click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining us. We'll be live again 1 month from now, of course, as we already mentioned. Tell your friends about the good things we're doing here on the channel. And I can't wait to be with all of you on the 15th, hopefully before then, though. And until next month, as we always say, and as you all know, what do we say when we want to say goodbye in Pennsylvania Dutch? I believe it's Mock Scoot, everybody. Mock Scoot zu dir, Mock Scoot zu dir, Mock Scoot zu dir für now. Unsere Zeit ist all und so, es ist Mock Scoot für now. Hoff wieder mit dir zu sein, hoff du bringst zurück ein Freund. Mock Scoot zu dir, Mock Scoot zu dir, Mock Scoot zu dir für now. Unsere Zeit ist all und so, es ist Mock Scoot für now. Hoff wieder mit dir zu sein, hoff du bringst zurück ein Freund. Und so Mock's gut, lieber Freund, Mock's gut.